my timer and then I'll start my speech. POI is verbally. Unmute yourself at the fifth minute. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Oh, wait. Yeah, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. An average voter in the status quo must have control over great technology. Insofar as this control is legally absent, I don't think OpenAI has an incentive of appeasing an average voter. It is very crucial to define what legal definitions and legal implications for this is. I think a legal implication pushes strong companies to greater visibility and ensures accountability. I think the current social mission, which is the current mission is a social mission over profit, is very ambiguous. And that is where I move over to my setup. I think social missions and terms like these are oftentimes invisible and exist only internally within the company. You have certain values that you want to prioritize, but the problem here is these values are oftentimes in flux. So you at one time want to prioritize accessibility, but at the same time you want to increase quality and perhaps raise awareness. All these issues are oftentimes contradictory to each other. In order to increase accessibility, you have to decrease the quality because your investment in the status quo is severely insignificant, which eventually means even if you want to achieve a social mission, your social mission is compromised by the mere fact that your investment is severely limited. I think in the status quo, oftentimes this social mission is perceived to be infallible. Your capacity to question whether a company is actually successful in this social mission is severely restricted because of problems like bureaucratic red tapeism. All these issues are internal, and an average voter does not have enough information about it to feel concerned or actually question the problems that OpenAI has in the status quo. I think success is symmetric in this debate, because in the recent times there is mass awareness about the benefits of ChatGPT and of AI technology. Insofar as that is true, I believe that we've significantly broken into the sphere of this debate, where now companies can easily scapegoat responsibility by saying that no, an institution cannot question us because we have our own bureaucratic internal structures. That is why problems like bad recommendation and bad therapy, etc., are so prevalent in AI systems. I'm going to have three arguments in this debate. Primarily, why this increases quality on our side of the house and why quality is significantly worse at opposition. Secondly, in which side of the house there is more accountability, and how do you promote good action? On quality, I think in order to get good quality in the status quo, what you need to do is have significant research in different multiple dimensions that AI is existent right now. This is a constantly developing field, which means you always need to set up new technologies, etc. Insofar as good technology is inaccessible because of tariffs, high prices, etc., the burden on ChatGPT to increase its quality in the status quo is severely reductive, because it can easily say that, oh, we're prioritizing the social mission over increasing the quality of the product. The reason for why this is a moral harm is that oftentimes this information gives us misleading knowledge. So for example, how AI operates right now is that ChatGPT gets its information from web. It is unable to determine the truth value of which information is more important and which is bad. This leads to a quantitative harm. The quantitative harm is that we are actively being fed a majoritarian way of thinking, where quality oftentimes is compromised. We are fed wrong opinions, and a vast majority of people suffer from this epidemic. I think the only way to solve this issue is perhaps when you have a legal accountability to ensure that every single individual can stand up and petition against you if you have racist views or if you give them bad information. I think in the counterfactual, you don't have that advantage at opposition, because notice, social mission is ambiguous. We were unaware that or technology gave you this harm, but because we're prioritizing on other greater issues, I don't think this harm is that important. I think the second reason for why quality is bad is that oftentimes you don't have enough investors to even do good things if you have decent incentives. So for example, investors want to prioritize a lucrative opportunity and they're always going to look elsewhere. In the status quo, you are being invested in by Microsoft, etc. But ever since Bard has come into power, Microsoft's incentive of constantly investing in you is is severely reductive, which inhibits the growth of this newer technology. I think growth is significantly important because insofar as a vast majority of people are accessing this technology, it is crucial that this technology forms their consent and gives them the right information so these individuals are better off. On the third level, I think the impact right now that ChatGPT has is severely racist because it is bad on identities across spectrums that don't have a majoritarian view. So for example, I recently searched define the average Indian experience. All I found was racist alienation blatantly being propagated to me. I think the reason for why this is crucially bad and we solve this at opening government is by a legal accountability process. The reason for why this is true is because oftentimes regulation can only come through a good structured institution such as the Senate, etc., to be able to ask for justifications, to be able to force another company to abide by laws that it is legally bound by. I think even an average individual can petition in the parliament, can petition in the Supreme Court, etc., if he's being fed bad information. Social mission at opposition bench is ambiguous. It is filled with internal barriers that these companies can easily exploit. But when you have a legal obligation, you have a greater probability of ensuring good quality. On the second level, I think competition is something that is likely to keep prices fairly low. But before that, I'll take a POI from CEO.
So this is a lie. Like, you are still a company that is bound by various other regulatory laws. This team doesn't really explain the need for you to legally define public goods.
Regulations oftentimes exist, sure, but they're able to scapegoat their regulation by saying that we're not for profit, etc., and exists below a veneer of invisibility. You are generally perceived to be a good charitable actor if you don't fight for profits, which means that even if someone petitions against you, this petition against you is not that strong, and he's probably going to be called out by society that, oh, you petitioned against, let's say, EV Foundation or a social justice movement, and that is why you're a bad individual. I think the reason why accountability is more likely to happen on our side is companies have a greater burden on the image that they want to preserve. Is within a veneer of infallibility. But when you're for a profit institution, there is greater discussion and greater critique going over you. I think the second reason for why opening government wins this debate is to prove that even in the best case scenarios in the status quo, you have premium features that you want, that you have a burden of presenting, because you need to make sure that you have enough running experiences. Insofar as this feature exists and individuals are already disenfranchised in the status quo, I don't know why it is bad to democratize this process and to give equal quality to all individuals and give them the power to question the superiority of a stronger institution of power. For all these reasons, opening government.
Thank you very much for that speech. Just a reminder for speakers to keep their speech within 7 minutes and 15 seconds, because everything after that won't be tracked or recorded by myself and my other judge. And with that being said, I'd like to call on the leader of opposition to start their speech whenever they're ready.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah. Yes, you're audible.
Just give me a second. I'll take POIs verbally, preferably in a minute. Cool.
TPM, please begin your speech. TPM, per the rules, I'll have to start your timer if you don't start speaking.
Yeah, so sorry. I think my internet just, malfunctioned. I'm starting my timer now. Sorry for that. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Opening opposition concedes to the fact that perhaps you might take a lot of time to develop your AI, and that is perhaps a good thing. We argue on the alternative. Jazib gives you in his speech a very clear mechanism as to how currently to save costs, the AI in itself has to attach its servers to the web results and generally the online trend that is going on in the status quo. This means that oftentimes majoritarian views that are present in the online platform are also reflected in the AI, in the answers that AI gives. I think this is necessarily bad because the probability of having any sort of check on the spread of misinformation in this AI is less, because you do not get enough profit to effectively have those accountability mechanisms that are really important for you to effectively make your AI ethical, even if you want to make your make your AI ethical. I think insofar as they do not provide you any sort of mechanism as to how this misinformation is not going to exist on their side, I think this is effectively bad for you for 3 reasons. One, I think oftentimes due to internet viral trends existing, I think the very fact that an AI tool oftentimes has given a very racist remark on something gets viral on the internet and gets a lot of popularity in a very short amount of time, which means that the capacity to harm minorities and generally hurt their own feelings is something that is perhaps very popular and is something that is perhaps heard throughout the internet, and the AI is called out to be very bad for that. On a second level, I think the harm that you get as to the reputation that is perhaps tarnished as to when these information these bits of pieces of you AI giving you misinformation or perhaps giving you bad material goes out, it also harms the OpenAI's generally image as a stakeholder in the market as well, because it also allows you to be not seen as an ethical stakeholder and prevents investors to invest into you because they are seen to be investing in a company that is perhaps not ethical or perhaps does not care about its sensitive minorities. Otherwise, it would have put some sort of barrier of research onto them. The second thing that we here to tell you is that oftentimes on our side of the house, the ability to have profit will generally be very easier, and we think that oftentimes the quality of AI in itself will be protected more on our side of the house. Why so? One, right now to cut costs, I think OpenAI is using premium subscriptions for a vast majority of individuals, and a vast majority of individuals have to pay to get full facilities of the OpenAI. This makes it entirely problematic because your services are not available to a large majority of populace in full extent, and this is equally bad because right now you're facing a lot of competitors in the market who are also AI tools, etc. For example, Meta, for example, Bard. I think users insofar as go to these other tools because they do not have those subscriptions means that OpenAI at the point in time is losing a lot of its subscriptions because the people are going to other actors on actors in the market as well, which means that you are going to be unpopular and your profit is going to be reduced by the minute. I think this is better on our side of the house because one, you get a lot of profit from a lot of companies and you are not required to generally have the subscription to begin with, because the gap that you needed to fill for the subscription is coming from other companies that are perhaps now investing in you more because they see you as a lucrative opportunity because AI is really relevant. But on a second level, I think there is often a voter pressure to often subsidize the quality, the premium qualities of premium facilities of the AI in itself as well, which means that it is generally going to be more and more accessible as well. I think I have one fundamental problem with opening opposition. The rest on one simple premise that rich people and technocrats will generally control AI and they'll be very bad by it. I have 3 responses to this. One, this assumes that oftentimes all state people and all politicians are selfish and bad and they are going to be doing equally heinous shit. I don't think that this is a fair assumption to make because most of politicians out there are generally very good too and generally care for better image as well. But even if that's not true, I think legal accountability on the state people also exists. Insofar as the government in itself is perhaps generally separated into three or four different institutions that keep a synologous check on each other, means that the magnitude of accountability that happens on our side of the house is always going to be more as compared to on their side of the house where you have internal accountability mechanisms set in. But secondly, I think oftentimes these state resources have re-election incentives as well, where they oftentimes are feared to be called out by the opposition parties or perhaps the media houses if they do some shit that is perhaps really bad, which means that they constantly live under a fear that if they try to misuse this in the first place, is not going to be not going to happen very sincerely. But even if we assume that all politicians are perhaps bad, I think still they are going to have a good good legal binding on these AI to begin with. Why so? Because oftentimes government want to be appear as actors who are investing in vanity projects, in projects that are perhaps very relevant even if they have no social utility, meaning that they want to maintain a good image in front of society even if they are not good. Insofar as that is true, they are likely incentivized to have some some sort of proper accountability mechanism on these companies as well, which makes them in in a very best scenario as well. Before weighing, I'll take a POI from closing.
So this is all a lie. You again don't explain the need for us to legally define what is public good. Oftentimes, OpenAI has already done multiple good stuff. So the idea about it being visible applies symmetrically. You do not need this law.
At least listen to our speech. We have told you the accountability mechanism that's happen on your side of the house are really weak and they're really difficult to maintain because you need a lot of resources for them. You have a burden to explain to us why, when companies do not have an incentive to generally get more profit from you, why are they likely to invest in you in the first place? Because they have other chat gpt, other options for AI that are generally giving them more profit returns, and they're likely to go to them and cause you a dearth of resources. On weighing, then I think generally on their side of the house, at best this AI is going to be a lot accessible, but it is going to be of a lower quality as well because you do not have enough resources to maintain it. Why so? Because you oftentimes have to pay the wages or generally pay for all the developers that currently work in the environment in your countries, and generally have to pay for their salaries, etc., or provide them a lot of resources for them to continue their research, or perhaps buy a lot of technology and pay a lot of duties and tariffs to other things that generally allow you to have a significant amount of resources that you cannot get if you do not take effective resources from them to begin with. But secondly, you also need to tap into new research groups and new areas insofar as you need to have more information that your AI can give to other people. I think it's really important. I think insofar as we also generally have more foolproof mechanisms for misinformation, we also have accountability on more magnitude and depth as well. This does not happen on their side of the house because they have the ability to scapegoat legislation, because they can simply come out and say that, oh, we already have an internal accountability mechanism on our side of the house. This means that the government in itself is not incentivized to put pressure on you directly because they are seen as doing something that is perhaps not needed to begin with. We tell you that even if that is not true, accountability cannot happen because you do not have enough resources to generally put a lot of people that oftentimes are on the case to measure what is happening, what is not happening correctly, etc., which means that the capacity to generally have this is more very, very bad. But lastly, then I think resources on our side of the house is always going to be more, because oftentimes companies that effectively put more resources into something, they oftentimes also expect a yield over the long term and oftentimes create contracts, which means that the probability of you getting resources on a longer amount of time are always going to be likely. I think OG is a clear first in this debate.
Thank you very much for that speech. Again, just a reminder for speakers to keep their speeches within 7 minutes and 15 seconds because we won't be tracking or recording anything else said after that point. With that being said, I'd like to call on the DLO to close up the top half. On the member of government to open up the back half of the debate.
Hi, before I start, I just want to let you guys know that there's a very heavy storm happening where I live now. So if you hear very loud thunder, I really apologize. All right, pronouns she, her. I'll take your eyes in the chat. Thank you, Raymond. No, I'm safe in the house. It's just I'm from Kajang, you know. Okay. Pronouns she, her. Your eyes in the chat. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think the thing about opening half is they never really tell you why things like getting a better user base and making sure more people can use ChatGPT deserves to be the priority of the debate. I feel that opening half is really ignorant towards the role of OpenAI and AI in general in the international political economy. They only really discuss ChatGPT, completely ignoring these small the fact that this is incredibly small compared to things like cancer detection research that they do, the idea of engineering and automation that they do. And when we talk about social good, because there was a lot of talk in the open half about oh, please define social good, this is the exact type of social good that they do, ensuring that these sort of projects can be done and provided to people without harming things such as jobs and ethics. It is to aid these developing industries in becoming more efficient and more productive. Note that even if research and development happens in both worlds, we say that the type of research and development which happens in opposition's world is way worse. note that progress has already been made. It means that this sort of technology is out there, but there are some stakeholders, especially developing states and their markets, which are continuously locked out of this sort of development, and therefore the hegemonic disparity and economic disparity on the internationally speaking gets worse. We say that this progress, even if made at a rapid rate in opposition's world, will just widen that disparity. And if research and development is a trade-off which needs to happen, we're fine with that, because we think the type of research and development which is made in our world, even if slower, is still way better. Additionally, opposition is correct in pointing out that OpenAI can in fact benefit from first movement, and saying that, even if ROI slows down, they can still be innovative. What we think is more important is discussing the fact that much of the world has become increasingly dependent on automation. We said developing states having this economic anxiety because they're increasingly locked out of a hegemonic dominated market. The fact that, Malaysia cannot compete with countries like Taiwan and Singapore because they cannot access automation and digitization, because they simply cannot afford to invest in a company with capped profits. It looks like instability because they cannot risk working with someone who is so low returns, even if that company is one of their only gateways into automation, making these states increasingly locked out. What this debate should be about, and how we enter and position ourselves in this debate, is that we believe in the access to benefits of AI, which can only be done through the PBC model. By the end of this speech, it's going to be clear. The part of it will be clear. Developing states cannot currently access the rise of AI under the LLC model. PBC opens those doors for them, and the IP disparity, international political economy disparity, goes down. Few things in my speech. I'm going to give you a quick illustration about the relationship between states and corporations. I'm going to talk about where developing states and their markets cannot access the AI under the current status quo. And lastly, I'm going to do a comparative why economic development is so much better in our world using the PBC model. Let's first talk about these states, right, and their markets. Understand that they're dependent on the corporations that they invest in for labor, efficiency, progress, new tech, collaboration, so on and so forth. Note, governments and their corporations cannot invest in everything, even if it's one of the best opportunities in the world. Even if shares in OpenAI are beneficial, it doesn't mean that it cannot invest, given that these returns are currently limited, and the current market cannot necessarily adapt to that tech, because these R&Ds and these social missions done by OpenAI currently are not necessarily dictated by these developing states and their markets. It's dictated by these conglomerates who can afford to have these smaller returns, right? But secondly, let's talk about LSCs and profits, because they never really told us what that world looks like, right? It looks like capping profits for investors, meaning that the number of shares given to these investors are likely to be limited, and therefore less invested, but also the money for these social missions will also be limited. But lastly, note that in status quo, this is status quo, and this progress has in fact been made, meaning that many states want to access these benefits but cannot. But last, on our world, on PBC, the only real delta is that there's no cap to things such as social missions and profit. It's likely to have more investors because those returns can be maximized, and therefore those better investments mean more projects and more profit. Note that shareholder power is symmetric, which means that anybody who invests is likely to get seat at that board where they can discuss what social missions and what R&D should be done. Before I continue, sure, I'll take that POI.
Right. Oh, thank you. Unless OpenAI is entering into the medicinal field, cancer detection AI isn't selling their product compared
Yeah,
to...
you know what's actually incredible? The fact that they have entered into this field, the fact that they do work in things such as cancer detection, because it's not just about ChatGPT. They don't only have an LLM. OpenAI is an AI company which seeks out to use AI to create technology which can benefit. You only know about ChatGPT. Sorry, people only know about ChatGPT because that's the only one that everybody uses, right? But the reality is these corporations are incredibly dependent on OpenAI for different types of diverse projects, right? Now, first argument then, why is it that states and their markets cannot access the rise of AI and status quo? Understand that one, OpenAI cannot simply afford to accept all investors and shareholders because they have those limited and capped profits, right? They're likely to accept investors who can afford these long-term investment. It looks like investors who can invest more and don't really mind the cap profits because the benefits are okay. The fact that you're not getting returns doesn't hurt them so much, and therefore they can access these investments, right? Compare this to developing states. Understand that developing states and their firms cannot really appease OpenAI the way that these companies can. There's less budget, they have these like domestic political and economic issues and instability, and the firms are often smaller, which means they cannot access. The impact is clear. They're essentially locked out of this AI market. They're less able to purchase these shares, and therefore, because they're not one of the shareholders, they don't necessarily get a say in the social mission, meaning that this social mission under opposition's world is likely to be conglomerate and Western-centric, which is why they've collaborated with Meta, but not Sime Darby from Malaysia. I want to note also an importance here, the shift in status quo in which the progress has already been made. The digitization is a prerequisite for many economies to actually perform, and the fact that these people are being locked out is such an incredible incredible harm, not only in terms of technology, but also in terms of economy and economic relationships internationally. Let's talk about the comparative then, and why the PBC model really overcomes this. Understand that one, developing states and their markets are just so much more able to enter. The fact that there's no longer these capped profits mean that there's much greater returns, and meaning that they can access greater returns given that they choose to invest, meaning that that investment is more justified, it's much more likely to get parliamentary and public appeal in terms of the government, but also just the smaller, no more pure eyes, but also in these smaller firms, the ability to just convince and feel like the ROI is actually worth it because it's not capped, it's way higher, especially given that OpenAI is obviously going to make a profit, right? They're like the biggest company in the world right now. But also, no, existing corporations are much more likely to reach out to these smaller firms and smaller companies because now there's for profit, their capacity to collaborate and reach out is way better. Those returns are way higher. So the incentive to spread that technology and create deals with these smaller firms are way more likely. But secondly, not that OpenAI's social mission will improve. It's the creation of an avenue for our stakeholders to invest and own shares. The ability to discuss that social mission as a result of being a shareholder increases. But also note that more OpenAI development centers are more likely to be opened in the developing world. Therefore, we can claim opening benefits on making that the ChatGPT, right? Because now you have more people in these developing states. The impact is clear. The increased access to the benefits of AI, which is incredibly integral to every economy, can only happen in CG's world. And on that, we win. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that speech. I'd like to call on the member of opposition. Yeah, you are both of those things.
Why? Okay. Yeah. So, in order to do effective charity, what you need to have is enough profit to be able to give back to the society primarily. And secondary, you already have quality given to people, but on the basis of premium subscription that you're forced to sell because you want your running expenses to continue.
Thank you very much for that speech. I'd now like to call on the government whip.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah.
Atifa's extension was not just about medicine. Atifa's extension was about the developing world not wanting to invest into OpenAI because of two reasons, which is just the delta. First, that it is in fact a capped investment. So it is something which it is unlikely going to pass within their, say, legislative bodies. But second, that it is just unregulated and therefore a riskier investment, something that in developing countries and just corporations within developing countries will look at as just unattractive. These two unique deltas flip on our side when you have more regulation and you have uncapped profits. That's the very point in which you have far more data centers within the developing world. That's when you have offices of OpenAI open in the developing world. Atifa suggested to you that this willingness only comes when you do actually adopt this particular model. And that's the very point in which, yes, you get a diversification of the use of OpenAI. Atifa suggested to you that if it was at that time the need for cancer research, that it would be the need for cancer research. But more importantly, that it gives access to far more diversity because you are in fact opening in far more various regions as opposed to just say the majoritarian white Western countries which Opening House was talking about. But additionally, that you just have far more data sets of this particular diverse culture, which allows the dilution of these majoritarian narratives within the Opening House that they were so worried about. Less racism occurs on our side. More development, different development occurs on our side, the point in which you allow developing countries and just MNCs within developing countries to feel like they can in fact opt into that particular model. That was our extension. Let's first deal with opening opposition. Opening opposition says three things generally: that there is a monopolization, you can consolidate power, and that there is an inaccessibility. The problem with opening opposition is they're just simply logically incoherent. They largely assert to you all of these things. They never explain to you why a cap means they're probably going to get far more diversity, especially given Atifa had POI. The only people who can invest into businesses that are in fact capped profits are likely majoritarian in nature, therefore not accessing any of that diversity. But second, that there is in fact vague regulations on their side of the world. This means that, and they never told you why, it is likely these vague regulations will somehow manifest in fairer operations. I think that was a relatively fair call out of OG to do, and I think that was a relatively fair thing that they did in fact capitalize on. Now, why is it likely to be worse on their side of the world? Three reasons. Number one is only the rich can in fact invest and are willing to invest into this particular model, because more often times than not, they are the only ones who can be willing to lose billions of dollars, when on the comparative, these developing countries and MNCs within developing countries simply wouldn't want to risk that. B, that it is not legally binding. Yes, I concede with closing opposition that to some extent, this legal obligation can still be worked around. The very fact is, it is harder to work around, and therefore we're probably still going to get far more legal concessions on our side. Even if it's not that marginal, there is still a difference there. C, that OpenAI can't afford to be accessible. It is on their side of the world where they have to push business models which forces us to actually opt for paying, because they don't have this unlimited investment pool that they can opt into. That's when on their side of the world, three very certain outcomes happens on opposition side. First, the rich will most definitely dominate these boardrooms because they're the only ones who can actually opt for these particular investments. And therefore, that's when you get access all of these harms, such as the indiverse, like majoritarian narratives, which they were talking about. Second, that you will more easily avoid legal ramifications. Yes, to some extent, it is still something that you can jump through loopholes for, but on our side of the world, that is still a delta. I don't think it's a winning case delta. I don't think opening government should have run that, but it is still a certain outcome. Third, that you have to pay to play. On our side of the world, when you have this unlimited pool that you can actually opt into, that's the very point in which you can actually say, hey, users, here's OpenAI. But additionally, just allow the developing world to access those particular benefits, ones which they need the most. They need to digitize in order to catch up with the developed world. That's the only way those economies can actually expand. It can only expand when they have this unlimited pool. Before that, yes, opening.
Before you cut me off, then R&D sharing is more likely to happen where company profit structure isn't incentivized to gatekeep their own development. It's more likely that they'll buy in more smaller AI companies and monopolize. Please engage.
Monopolize. Again, I think as long as these other competitive companies like Meta still exist, there would be no incentive for them to purchase those players. Additionally, those players are not up for sale. That competition is probably a wash, and therefore why it is not just a winning case. Let's deal with CO before I outframe OG. CO generally runs the very stock arguments of why being for-profit is bad. Two things here. First, that it is short-term, and therefore it is likely OpenAI will be short-term in their outcomes. I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, and this is where I flip it, right? An average intelligent voter is probably scared of AI because it's probably going to take 1 billion of our jobs the moment it reaches a certain point, like ChatGPT 6.0. I think in as far as we're able to limit that, slow it down, but still access a vast amount of benefits for the developing world, which can already be accessed in ChatGPT 4, but they just don't have the opportunity to because there's no data sets and centers to actually adapt those particular texts for those developing countries. We're completely fine with that, and we're completely fine with it slowing down. They have to justify why it ought to be faster. But second, they talked about why their share price is probably going to fluctuate. Look, man, I don't think this share price fluctuating is going to be non-symmetrical. It's probably symmetrical, but even then, it is probably completely fine on both sides of the world, which is mitigation for you, right? Just because AI is generally one of the most stable markets right now. I don't think CO has a path to victory after that. What does OG say, and why is OG out of this debate? OG generally runs accountability, and they just wait. Where is my paper on OG? There's my paper on OG. OG runs accountability. The problem with OG is they never analyzed you why changing these laws are likely to mean that OpenAI can change all of these majoritarian narratives. This is because no amount of legal ramifications can actually force OpenAI to rework their data sets. It is only on our side of the world, and it is only closing government that explains to you when you allow these developing countries to opt in and to open up operations of OpenAI within their countries, that you can give them these new data sets to therefore come to a more proximate idea of what the world should be, as opposed to the majoritarian narratives on their side. They're probably just going to pay off legal ramifications in OG and continue to be majoritarian in nature. We give you the data sets. Second, that you need money to operate. I think money is relatively symmetrical and something that OG can't win on, because on their side of the world, OpenAI has been making progress, and they will continue to make progress even if there's uncapped or rather capped investments, because the developed world will continue to invest in those types of things. I think that's why on their side of the world, they're never necessarily going to explain to you why any delta in AI progress is going to win them the debate. We told you why it is only when you allow it to be uncapped, when the developing world has an incentive to opt in, and that's how you get diversification, and that's how you get progress which looks diverse.
Thank you very much for that speech. I'd now like to call on the opposition whip to close up the debate.
Hi, am I audible?
Yep.
Cool. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Our extension talks about two things. The first on why the counterfactual, the actors that invest in OpenAI tends to be significantly worse on the industry as a whole. The second on why the PBC model of legal obligation is significantly more minimal, that shifts the incentive of OpenAI to one that is significantly more malicious. First, I'll talk about quality, then accountability, and lastly on CG's idea about developing states. The first is on quality. Does the social mission harm the quality of OpenAI? Not really. You still have the legal account liability company with various investments from various different channels. Literally, OpenAI signed a partnership recently with Microsoft to channel in huge amount of investment into AI while maintaining its non-profit mission. So it's untrue that you need like a lot of money, because you already have a lot of money right now, a lot of investment right now from existing investment by Microsoft. Secondly, oftentimes they are the largest AI company in the world, but a long shot relative to the competitors. So yes, various competitors exist, but because of Microsoft's investment into OpenAI, the access to data and computing power is one that is consolidated and one that significantly benefits OpenAI, which means that they play the largest field within the market. Third, this is also a lie. ChatGPT can generate hyper-realistic images, cite various sources, present logical arguments, etc. So maybe it's true that AI has various flaws, but that's a generic argument. The rate of development is for AI spearheaded by OpenAI means its quality is still improving and it's something that is symmetrical. They don't prove that the quality of it will somehow magically get better under the PBC model. So this is kind of funny, because the claim is that AI is racist. What's the reason for it being racist? Nothing. But if they are racist, obviously people will call it out and not use it, so they risk losing their user base to other companies as well. So it's unclear as to why there's an incentive for OpenAI to want to be racist. This team just really doesn't prove it. Secondly, on accountability. So this is pretty funny, because the gov claim is that we need to hold OpenAI accountable. Why was this insufficient? The first is that they don't really explain the need to transition, because both OpenAI Incorporated and OpenAI LLC are still subjected to various regulations and laws right now when it comes to how you develop AI. In fact, the non-profit branch of OpenAI openly advocated and called for increasing state regulation onto the development of OpenAI because of its adherence to its social mission. The issue with the Gulf case is, as per their speech, they are a highly visible company that's very influential in various other fields and sectors, means that they are subjected to public scrutiny as well. So it's true that you need laws to regulate AI. I don't dispute this. They don't prove that we need this specific law to define what is public good, especially the non-profit branch as it is right now. It's highly receptive to social issues and public goods as it is right now, and they're oftentimes very much involved when it comes to addressing these kinds of issues as well. Things like cancer, for example, things like climate change, things like making sure that you have access to actual healthcare. These are all things that OpenAI does right now. But it's worse, because what constitutes as public good legally oftentimes is very blurry. So if on both sides OpenAI cares about its social mission, then the harm doesn't really lie there. Our extension explains that the harm lies in who's actually investing in OpenAI when you remove the profit cap, which tends to be health insurance company, social media algorithms, or things like weapon and manufacturing, for example, which are the most prone or the ones that tends to benefit the most when it comes to having access to AI within the algorithm. I'll explain why legal accountability becomes minimal, directly engages with OG. Why does the PBC model shift the incentive for OpenAI to be one that's for profit? First, the board of directors changes. So the ones governing OpenAI is no longer non-profit, but dominated by businessmen and shrewd AI developer who obviously have more reason to discard their social mission and have more for-profit trajectory when it comes to OpenAI's future. Secondly, the second is that oftentimes OpenAI LLC and their for-profit incentive takes further precedence over their non-profit counterpart. This means that even when development happens, a lot of it becomes not only locked behind a paywall to maximize profit, but used for malicious things like surveillance or weapons manufacturing, for example, because these people are willing to pay in huge amount of money in order for you to be able to access these kinds of OpenAI. The third is that this operation and marketing becomes more for profit. This is the AI development into health insurance companies, social media surveillance, weapons manufacturing, for example. This takes Gov at their very best, where even if we concede that there's development, but the problem is that that development becomes less geared to what the public actually needs. So look at, for example, Cambridge Analytica, for example, that did utilize AI in order to manufacture and manipulate various other elections within the world, which means that oftentimes, because of the for-profit nature of it, the nature of OpenAI is one that's likely going to be more aligned with that of Cambridge Analytica as opposed to their actual non-profit counterpart. Second, I'll explain why legal oversight becomes minimal. The first is that the nature of OpenAI as a monopoly remains the same, but the incentive changes, which means that oftentimes there's a very significant lobbying power to deregulate AI development because of the immense legislative leverage that OpenAI has across the AI industry. So more people have to listen to them because they're the largest player in the field. The second is not only just OpenAI pandering to bad actors that have the largest amount of profit, but bad actors themselves consolidating their own respective industry via this technology and the uncapped nature of the profit, which means that bad companies themselves get significantly richer by tapping into AI. This proves OG's claim on accessibility, because the reason why it's accessible right now is because of its adherence to their social mission, but because its incentives shift from the public to private actor, so if people don't use AI because it's inaccessible on OG, they can always default to private investors that give them the bulk of their money as well. The third is on increasing more and more anti-competitive measures to stamp out BAR and other forms of AI development. What this means is that even when there's a breach to this legal obligation of the public good, it's significantly easier for you to dismiss it or pay it off because you have the vast amount of the other industry backing you up. The last and the conclusion is that because OpenAI is the only viable company within the AI industry, what constitutes as public good and the commitment to public good is up to their wins and interests. But even if you don't buy this, the nature of uncapped profit tends to disproportionately benefit harmful industries. That was our exception. Before that, Oji.
The frame at opening government was the commitment of public good is infallible. It is ambiguous, characterized by red tapeism. And secondly, if your greatest impact is being weaponized by bad industries, don't you think a legal accountability is a stronger check than internal commitment?
So yes, correct. We need legal accountability. You don't feel that it's enough for you to be able to overcome all these different things as well. So maybe you get legal accountability, but you're always able to. Oh, you can't POI, by the way. Oh my god. But you can't just do it because obviously the extent to which you're able to consider it is something that is thrown into question. So maybe you consider this, but obviously that doesn't overtake your money-making incentive as well. The last is on CG. CG says here that you help developing states. This is also just not true because it wasn't developing states investing in OpenAI, because developing states has other probably more crucial and more urgent things to investing within their own country. So this is a false dichotomy. Everyone can use OpenAI technology regardless of where they live. Literally, this isn't true. The business model means they cater to more short-term interests because it's the most certain way for them to be able to obtain profit. So at the end of the day, they don't really prove that developing states have an incentive to want to invest in OpenAI because they probably have other things they want to invest in that are probably a lot more short-term and a lot more proximate to them. So this is unclear as to where this is going at. The second is obviously about where the profit goes to. This thing concedes that OpenAI is branching out to various medical fields under the current model, which is they obviously still care about their social mission even within developing states as well. So it's just unclear to me as why the shift towards the PVC model is one that disproportionately benefits developing countries as opposed to private corporations that actually had the money to be able to invest significantly more within OpenAI. For all those reasons, oppose.
Thank you very much for that speech. I'd just like to ask